like to thank all the panels that are available with us today and all the participants. This is the kickoff of season 2, and we will start today with a new session about fintech innovation in the Arab world. So with the impact of COVID-19, it has forced us to change all. Consumers were previously resistant to using payment channels, mobile, websites, and others. They discovered today with purchasing goods and services on their smartphones is not only easy, but actually very convenient and safe. So Visa conducted a survey on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on payment behaviors of users and consumers in the UAE. 43% of the consumers surveyed believe they will continue using the contactless payments more and more in the store post the pandemic. And 48% of the users said they will continue to opt for more payment online with cards. And of course, today, there's a new term, digital wallets. 82% of the Middle East banking consumers surveyed are willing to start using fintech solutions. But however, 22% of them are only part of the solutions that are actually being used. There's a significant growth potential to address this gap between the 82% and the 22%. The use of fintechs today, we all know it. The benefits are greater convenience, more personalized services, advanced security, lower cost, financial inclusion, and so on and so on. Between the year of 2015 and 2020, the Middle East fintech sector received more than $237 million. And based on the 29 estimates, the industry is expected to climb by 230% by year 2020. Now with the COVID, we have to see what are the changes. And we know today, to reach the full potential of anything, especially in the payment terms, we need the regulators, we need the hubs, we need the ecosystem to actually start working all together. I will do a small housekeeping before we start. Please mute your microphone at any time. You can ask any related question using the chat box. We will dedicate the time at the end of the session for questions. You can raise your hand in the Q&A section. Polls will be running throughout the session. Feedback survey will also be running towards the end, and this session will be recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So with that, let me introduce our speakers. But before that, let me let people inside first. Okay. So my name is Rudy Shushani. I'm the host and the moderator. My specialty is ICT governance, cybersecurity, and digital transformation in the fintech world. So today's topic is fintech innovations in the Arab world. And I will introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Raja Al Mazrouei, Executive Vice President, DFIC Fintech HIVE, Board Member, Dubai Fintech Ventures. Our second speaker, Noha Shaker, Secretary General of the Egyptian Fintech Association, Vice President of the Africa Fintech Network. Mirna Sleiman, Founder and CEO, Fintech Galaxy. Namir Khan, Chairman, Founding Member of MENA Fintech Association. And Mohammed Sabouni, Managing Director of Fintech Dubai and Startup Bootcamp. So today, one last slide, and then we will start. The annual number of deals and the investments that are put in our region is growing year by year. So since 2015 to today, we've seen a growth, a big growth in investment, especially in the year 2017, and hopefully we'll see more growth. And we will still waiting for more numbers on the 2020 year, the year of COVID and year of disruption. What's gonna be the numbers? Are there investment? We've heard there's many investments happening. We just need the numbers, and hopefully our region can benefit altogether. With that, I will start with my first speaker. All right, sorry. Raja, I'll take the first question with you. In correlation with all that has been said above, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of UAE and ruler of Dubai, announced the UAE strategy of the future, a comprehensive roadmap that will take the nation on the next era of development. First, do introduce yourself. And secondly, what is the mission and role of Fintech HIVE in Dubai and correlation of the UAE strategy in the Arab region?
Thank you, Rudy, for having me today. It's my pleasure to be with all of you and my amazing colleagues from the industry. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Rajal Mazrouei. I'm the Executive Vice President for DIFC Fintech HIVE. Fintech HIVE is the first and largest fintech accelerator in the region. We started back in 2017 as an accelerator program. And to date, we've accelerated more than 100 companies through our different programs. We've engaged in more than 65 proof of concepts across different programs and launched more than 25 products in the market. Our fintech startups have raised to date more than $150 million in funding. And we are focused on developing the ecosystem for the fintech industry in the region, where we look for participation between the private and the public sectors, looking for opportunities to support the fintech startups to grow and scale in the region with the support of venture capital firms, investment funds, business opportunities through our financial institution partners. Now, going back to your question, in the year 2014, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the Prime Minister of the UAE, announced the year as the Year of Innovation. Year of Innovation was a strategy that was launched across the whole UAE and the federal and local government departments, including the DIFC. At that time, the question was asked, how do we disrupt ourselves? How do we become better? How do we transform the sectors that we are in charge of leading today? And that translated into lots of initiatives, including the launch of Smart Dubai, which is a government entity that is looking at digitizing the transactions of the local government department within Dubai, and the launch of the future accelerators from the Prime Minister office. And also a lot of accelerators launched in Dubai, specifically looking at DTech or the future accelerators and the government accelerators. When you look at the financial services sector, the DIFC is the leading financial center in the region. And we looked at a strategy of transforming the financial services sector and also to explore the future of financial services. And at that time, the fintech was evident to be a game changer. And this is why the DIFC launched the Fintech HIVE as an initiative to look at the opportunities of collaboration between the financial institutions with tech startups that could help them transform the sector. We launched the first program in 2017 with 11 startups. 2018, we had 22, and 2019, we had more than 30 startups join our program. And most of our startups are either based in the DIFC right now because they've landed business opportunities through our partners, or scaling in other neighboring markets where they were able to export the knowledge the regulation, and the access to funding to scale through these markets.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. There's a big initiative with the DFIC and the strategy that was put forward by His Excellency, and with with the things that you are also in charge with in this FinTech HIVE. I'll take the second question with Noha. Noha, please introduce yourself, and please also introduce Egyptian FinTech Association and what is its role in the Egypt strategy or Egypt economy, let's say.
Thank you very much, Rudy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us. My name is Noha Shaker. I'm the Secretary General of the Egyptian FinTech Association and a founding and the elected Vice President for Africa FinTech Network, which is the union of FinTech associations across Africa. What do? We are Egypt's first and only non-for-profit that is major role is to build, nurture, and grow that ecosystem of support for fintechs to serve financial inclusion. We work on policy advocacy to make sure that we have the right regulatory frameworks in place that enables fintechs. We work with the incumbent banks, insurance companies, and microfinance agencies, and the rest of the financial industry service providers. We work on their internal and open innovation strategies to make sure that we can support collaboration between the fintechs and the incumbents. We work on awareness and education, whether that awareness and education is for the general public, promoting for fintech use cases to support fintechs when they launch their businesses, or on the side of incumbent companies and financial institutions to change the corporate culture into a more welcoming corporate culture. We've worked with the Central Bank of Egypt, the financial regulatory authorities, on launching recently fintech laws that enables multiple innovative use cases that can be launched in the country to support the unbanked and the underbanked, to offer access to financial services to most of the population that hasn't been served by the financial institutions we have on the ground yet. We design and enroll private partnerships to serve our objectives, which are mainly the promoting innovation in industry, supporting and growing fintechs and the nurturing ecosystem, as well as promoting for partnerships between fintechs and incumbent financial institutions. And the African Union does exactly the same in 34 African countries, serving the exact same objectives. Thank you, Rudy.
Thank you. Thank you, Noha. I'll ask now Mirna. Mirna, please introduce yourself further, and also introduce for us FinTech Galaxy. Then later on, we're going to be having some great use cases that you have been involved in. We'll discuss them further more later on. Mirna, please.
Thank you, Rudy, and thanks all for having me today. My name is Mirna Sleiman, and I'm the founder and CEO of FinTech Galaxy. We are 3 years old, based out of Dubai, but actually we are in the virtual space, covering the whole region. What we do is basically we have realized that the region is quite disconnected, the ecosystem, not only in terms of geographies, but also in terms of pillars. And we've set up Fintech Galaxy to bring everybody together into one open innovation platform that does three main things. The first one is promotes open innovation and collaboration between banks and fintechs through hackathons, challenges, programs. We also have a fintech marketplace with more than 1,200 fintechs so far in our community. And of course, all the training events and everything. And the third thing, which is the most important part, is the API platform, which is called Phoenix 22. Now, the API platform basically helps fintechs connect to an API sandbox with more than 300 APIs with global standards, with 5 data sets from Saudi, UAE, Egypt, Bahrain, and Jordan. And this sandbox is free of charge for any startup or any entrepreneur that wants to build a prototype, anybody who wants to test their technology using data and APIs from the market. On the other side, we're onboarding banks, connecting the banks to this platform, and making sure that banks publish their APIs so that fintechs can use those APIs and produce some really good solutions. So that's the Phoenix 22 in a nutshell, and that's what Fintech Galaxy does. We've done more than 25 hackathons and challenges so far. We work closely with regulators in Egypt, Saudi, Bahrain, UAE, Jordan, Iraq, and yeah, we work with almost every single fintech association across the region, and also global associations. We have more than 15 partnerships with global associations.
Thank you, Mirna, for that introduction, and we'll get back for more details. Namir, and please introduce yourself and what is the role of Fintech MENA Association?
Thank you, Rudy. Number one, for having me over. Always a pleasure to be along with all of our superstar colleagues over here. And hi to everyone from different places from the region. So I'm from the MENA Fintech Association, as mentioned by Rudy. And what we typically do, I'll just frame it up in a very short way. MENA Fintech Association is more towards bridging the gap between the regulators, the policymakers, and the fintech community, on a large basis itself. Now, that basically includes when we're talking about policymakers, we're looking into, we're looking to bring the regulations into place where the fintechs are able to prosper. At the same time, the environment is conducive, because eventually, in the end, regulations need to be in place for fintechs to be able to operate seamlessly in the system and to be also able to raise. So policy making and policy advocacy is something that we closely focus and work on. One of the things that we're currently working on is certainly on the open banking vision that's focused on open banking in the Arab and the MENA region itself. Similarly, we have other verticals that we are currently engaged in working on. The reason is that eventually the regulators are responsible to protect the customers' right, but simultaneously at the same time we have, as Mirna mentioned, she has multiple use cases that she has already engaged into, and Fintech HIVE has been aggressively working on multiple fintech initiatives as well. So largely what happens is that disruptors are coming in and policymakers need to be aligned with that. The other thing that we also do is the community dialogue, because you need to engage the community dialogue to be able to bring those policies and bring those regulations in place. To bring that community dialogue, it is once again imperative and pivotal for the community itself to come on one single common page and what typically needs to be done and addressed, specific to key verticals. That could be on the digital KYC, that could be on open banking, that could be on robo-advisory. So there needs to be a common page that everyone needs to align to, and then of course after that be able to address that. So community engagement, policy advocacy. The other thing that we're currently working with the federal government on right now is talent. So that's currently in place too. So yes, that's in a nutshell what MENA Fintech Association is currently doing, and there's more to come.
Thank you for that, Namir, and I'm sure the collaboration between all of these Arab states and specifically in the MENA, you have a big mission to get them all together. Mostly all of you will be on this mission. Muhammad, also please introduce yourself and tell us more about Startup Bootcamp.
Sure, thank you, Rudy. So I'm currently the managing director for the Startup Bootcamp Fintech Accelerator here in Dubai. So the program is sponsored by DFIC, by Visa, and by Mazrouei Bank, and we're gonna start our cohort number 3 next month. So by mid-November, we just finalized the selection for the last 10 for this cohort's 10 companies, and we're starting next month. Startup Bootcamp, we've been around since 2010. Basically, what we do is we run sector-focused accelerators around the globe. I think we're present now in about 27 countries. Overall, internationally, we have about 1,000 startups across the different verticals. Specifically, with the survival rate of about 80% over the last 10 years. So specifically in the MENA, we just crossed the 100 startups in the region in our portfolio. About 40 to 50% are actually in the fintech space. So between here and Cairo, we have, I think, about 4 or 5 cohorts that are focused on fintech. We also do everything from in the region, from Qatar sports, from sports tech, from to Dubai Smart City. So we ran these programs previously. Overall, what we offer the startups, and specifically with our partners here in Dubai, is access to the market in UAE, Saudi, in the region in general, help them come in and set up in the IFC, support them in their initial validation, with the fundraising, with the access to market in general. And that's it. I mean, plus we help them run POCs, proof of concepts, with all our partners. And help them establish here, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Muhammad. Raja, I'm gonna ask you about the women in fintech. They are reshaping the industry today. What message would you give to the women in the region? What power message would you give them?
Rudy, obviously, the fintech sector so far is dominated by my female colleagues, and I think the opportunity for women to make an impact on the sector is huge because it requires a certain skill of understanding the technology and the financial services, and in some supporting roles. And in this particular region, we see lots of initiatives that support women to grow and develop, whether from talent perspective or from funding perspective. We can see some VC funds that invest specifically in female co-founded businesses. We see female-focused acceleration programs like the program we run at the DFIC Fintech HIVE, Accelerate Her, where we look at female talent from the financial services sector, introduce them to the fintech sector in general, introduce them to the fintech startups to understand the opportunities or the impact that they can create by either taking on innovation and technology roles within their organizations, or maybe partner with other partners and launch their own tech startups. We saw how COVID accelerated the digital transformation of all sectors, and we got very comfortable with technology, which is very evident when you look at how many business ideas were launched from home during the pandemic. And having access to the regulation, to ecosystems that support the development, the funding, the regulation of these technologies really makes it easy for anyone to access this particular opportunity. However, women have this additional focus and support from a strong ecosystem that really understands the impact they add and the value they add into any business.
Thank you. I'm sure you have a great mission again, and the women in the region, they still playing a big role, and there's still a big role to play, and hopefully this will be bridged soon, not just by the unbanking the bank the unbanked people, also the woman part. Namir, question: what do you think will happen to the partnership between banks and fintechs in post-COVID 2019?
It's a good question.
Or was gonna be, or there's gonna be a bigger gap?
So I think, I mean, I'm looking at the market closely right now. I look at the fintech engagement in two forms. One form is one form of fintech is basically those form of fintechs that are challenging the banks completely, right? So you have digital banking players coming into play, and they're the ones who are going to be completely challenging the overall digital banking space over here. And not just in the UAE, but definitely into the other key developed markets as well. And even looking into emerging markets too, same is the case. Now, the other form of fintechs are those fintechs who are going to empower the banks, right? So I see two form of fintechs. So the ones that are basically empowering the banks, certainly there are more avenues for them to partner with them. So eventually, why would you need to partner with the bank as well is it boils down to the regulatory piece as well. So specifically, if you're operating into a fintech vertical that requires you to operate or piggyback on a bank's banking license, then you have no chance but to partner with the bank. So partnerships are happening. So for example, you do have, Kareem, for example, is launching the super app, and they're launching their card as well. Just a small example. Eventually, by the end of the day, what happened is that if they're launching a card, they must be having a BIN sponsorship at the back. So then you have to partner with the bank typically, right? So partnerships with bank will continue to happen, but that depends typically of what sort of a fintech is it. Now, second thing is that, like I said, the fintechs that are empowering the banks to become more open. Let's say you have banks who are now looking openly and keenly looking in for solutions to be able to become a lot more relevant. And then you have platforms like Mirna's platform, Finex22, as you mentioned, that enables the banks to be able to connect with the fintechs at the same time, be able to be a lot more open. Now, why banks need to be able to do that is because then you have the larger players, like the tech players, who are entering into the financial services landscape, right? So eventually, if the banks would not be able to do that, if they would not open up, if they would not work with the likes of these of these fintechs, and typically these super apps and these technology players eventually will end up taking the space. So I think it's a win-win proposition for fintechs from both the angles. One is the ones that are empowering, because the banks need them, because banks are too large enough to be able to do this on their own, right? At the same time, the ones that are challenging is an open space for them, right? But once again, if you're challenging the banks, then you need to have access to capital itself and all of those things. So eventually, the gap for the customer is going to be reduced for multiple needs. We may be an overbanked market itself, right, Mina? And at the same time, we are an underbanked market too. But what we do have an oversupply of connectivity. So eventually, the customer is eventually going to win in terms of the overall fintech race, and the gap is definitely going to be not increased, but certainly it's going to be shortened as well with the key initiatives that are coming in. So, like I said, two types. One is empowering, and the other is challenging. Both the ways, fintechs have a win-win proposition.
Thank you, Namir. And I'm sure they do. And this is the second part, possibly, of the next phase of fintech's game now.
By the way, it's not going to be easy. Just let you know. It may sound easier. It's easier said than done, right? So it's not an easy journey when you're especially engaging with the banks. Simultaneously, it's not easy when you are dealing with regulations specifically to our region. So fintechs need to be extremely well versed with that, and that's where key platforms who are facilitating this will play a pivotal role to be able to connect the fintech to the banks, and of course be able to execute.
Yeah, I think also the regulators part is much needed. Mirna, let me ask you a question. You have introduced an innovation today in our region, which is in coordination with the Digital Lab of Bahrain. Can you tell us more about this initiative, FinHub 973, and what's the impact of it on the ecosystem?
Okay, sure. So building on what Namir said regarding this collaboration, see, it's a very, very complex phenomenon. Number one, banks and fintechs speak different languages. Second, regulations are very tough. I mean, regulators are a very tough stakeholder to deal with, to manage, and to comply with. And even when you bring everybody together, the technology doesn't really help you to do that connectivity. So we wanted to close the loop, and we wanted to move the region from talking into actually executing. So over the past 3 years, we've been trying to educate the market. We've been trying to run hackathons and challenges. But maybe out of the 25 hackathons and challenges that we've done, only 3 of them reached POC level, and even maybe 1 only went to the market. And that's made us realize that after this celebration and graduating from accelerators and all the programs, the actual collaboration between banks and fintechs is a rare commodity. It's really not happening. And we wanted to solve the problem. First of all, we wanted to bring to the market a platform that can bridge this gap from a technology perspective. And second is to do it under the supervision of a central bank. Now, why the central bank? Because central bank is the regulatory authority that makes things happen or not, okay? And even with fintechs that don't need licensing, it's always good to get the regulatory blessing from a central bank that will make the banks and the market feel much more comfortable dealing with this fintech. And when it comes to the interaction or the integration between the banks and fintechs, imagine from a bank's perspective, okay, let's take a banker's perspective. Banks want to collaborate with a fintech. They need to go and speak with 50 fintechs every month. They need to shortlist 10 that are really good to talk to. Then they need to do all this API documentation and find out what, are they ready, are they not, what kind of APIs do you need to connect, what's the language that the fintech speaks, what technology do they have, core banking. All of that is a lot of time and effort. So what we brought to the table, and that's Phoenix 22 basically, is you bring the fintechs, plug them into one platform, API gateway, and then invite the banks on the other side to connect with this platform. Now, we faced one issue, which is, okay, you need a regulatory environment. And that's where Bahrain FinHub 973 came to the picture. We launched, along with the Central Bank of Bahrain, a platform that, number one, has the regulatory oversight of a central bank. And the beauty about Bahrain is they have every single regulator under the same umbrella. You know, it's one central bank. They regulate onshore, offshore, stock markets, funds, banks, remittances, I mean, everything under one regulator. Number two, they have open banking laws, which allows banks and fintechs to collaborate. And number three, they are a very modern regulator and really easy to work with. And number four, which is very important, they actually managed to bring the banks on board, okay? So we ended up having a platform, which is an upgraded version of Phoenix 22 that has the regulators' supervision, all the open banking standards integrated into the platform, all the compliance, all the governance, everything in there. We also had 5 or 6 banks connected to the platform. And we have the fintechs on the other side. So now what we really need to do is just to make sure that the platform manages that collaboration. We are enrolling around 3 or 4 fintechs now to take them through the journey end to end. At the end of the day, and starting 2021, like January or something, any fintech can go into the platform. They can go through a virtual acceleration. They don't even need to be in Bahrain. They can go through a virtual acceleration. Then they get the regulatory nod to go and connect to the banks. They plug and play, and commercialization happens. This is the idea behind FinHub 973.
Great, thank you. Before I take Raja again, I just want to invite everybody, please, to put the questions in the chat for now, and then later on we'll take them. Also, I'm sharing again now all the LinkedIn profiles of our esteemed speakers in case you want to just follow them for more news. Raja's question, what's the impact of the FinTech HIVE on the UAE economy and all of this happening? And what's the plan post-COVID-19? I know because there's a lot of changes in the strategy. I'm sure you have faced them now. What's gonna happen? What's the restructuring? What's the strategizing for the post-COVID and maybe for the 2021 year ahead of us?
So obviously, when DIFC looked at FinTech as an industry, DIFC believed in the power of these startups and realized that we need to create an environment that is enabling for these startups to be able to get commercial licenses, access to co-working spaces, access to business opportunities, and so forth. So most of the startups that joined the program eventually were able to get the FinTech license from the DIFC. And I want to mention that this is a subsidized license at $1,500. And this was put in specifically to support the FinTech startups to get started within their journey. As I mentioned, through our different programs, we've accelerated more than 100 startups. But today, other than the programs, we have 200 FinTech startups registered in the DIFC. And these 200 FinTech startups are all engaged with business opportunities with financial institutions. They are recruiting talent from the region and also raising funding. So the impact on the economy overall is evident. And it will continue to grow because, as you've mentioned earlier, Rudy, the impact of COVID-19 has accelerated the digitization initiative. I remember back in 2017 talking about the FinTech, and the most common question was, what is FinTech? But today, when you go and meet with the financial institutions, they understand the impact, they understand the urgency, the priority of finding the most efficient way to connect with these startups to build the partnership, because that's the most efficient way to really target these issues. The startups will take time to build their customer base. The financial institutions will take a long time to build these technologies and solutions. So collaboration between the startups and the financial institutions will enable the fastest access to market for these technologies. And we continue to see the interest growing in those partnerships, and we will continue to support it as the industry.
Thank you. And I'm sure there's a big role. And now later on, I just want to ask a question to all my panelists. How many FinTechs do they have? So we can have maybe a round total of numbers. We'll discuss this later on. Noha, where do you think FinTech stands in the Egyptian economy, and any governmental initiative towards the knowledge economy in specific and FinTech economy in more specifying the economy structure of it? Because I've seen we have Egypt is kind of we've seen strategies for the 2030 and so on, but I have not seen personally anything related to the FinTech world. Maybe you can shed more light.
Well, if we look at the initiatives that happened only during the past 2 years, like 2019 and the year 2020, you would find 4 regulations, one covering digital money and wallets, another FinTech regulation as an amendment to the banking law to enable FinTech startups, a third one related to digital insurance, enabling onboarding and servicing customers via digital platforms in comparison to brick and mortar branches. And last but not least, the FinTech regulation that is about to be launched by the FRA in order to enable alternative financing models such as peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding. If you look at initiatives carried out by the central bank alone, you'd find the launch of the Fintech strategy in the year 2019, then the launch of our own sandbox that is mainly focused on fintechs that is currently about to accept its second cohort. You'd find a government fund that is focused on investing in fintech startups at such early stage to close in the funding gap that is present in the Egyptian market within the seed and the pre-seed series. And that's only the initiatives that are made by the government. If you look at publicly owned banks and privately owned banks, you would find the 3 out of the biggest banks in the region putting together fintech funds, whether it's Bank of Masr, whether it's CIB, whether it's the Bank of Egypt. And all those are initiatives to grow and support the fintech ecosystem. Well, I'm really glad to highlight, I mean, if you'd given me a bit ahead of like prior notice, I would have opportunities that are happening within the fintech ecosystem. Right now, I'm just speaking on like from the on the top of my mind, but there are a lot of activities happening. When we started 5-6 years ago, we put together the very first fintech accelerator like 6 years ago, and it was in collaboration with the American University in Cairo. Right now, we started with fintechs operating in the payment. Now you have fintechs operating in the savings, micro savings. You have fintechs currently working on forms of micro lending. So the ecosystem is maturing at a pace that is actually pleasant to us all, the ones who are active within the scene. And actually, there are 2 comments that I wanted to comment on what Namir said, that it's really difficult to grow and have that a second generation of fintechs. Well, I tend to agree, but again, once a fintech can find that area of pain where the financial service providers cannot close, cannot satisfy, once there is a need for it in the market, they become really easy to enter the market, sell their services, offer, and scale. Another comment that is very important on what Mirna said, that is very difficult now to find collaborations between fintechs and incumbent financial institutions, whether they're banks, insurance companies, or even microfinance agencies. I tend to agree, but the reason for that is not because banks do not want to. It's mainly due to 2 facts in here. The level of readiness at the end of banks, whether that readiness is technology readiness or corporate culture readiness. And the other part is there is no regulation in the majority of the Arab world that stipulates that banks have to cooperate or collaborate with fintechs in order to serve financial inclusion, to offer financial services extended to unbanked, underbanked, or inadequately served individuals or businesses. And this is where, if you look at the UK and the European Union, you'd find the open banking, the PSD 1 and 2, and they are there just to make sure that fintechs step in and fill in the gap that actually is present within the performance of the financial service providers. I hope that has answered your question.
It was, and it enlightened me even more because I've seen some minor initiatives, but now you enlightened me about the major initiatives that is happening there. Because I've been a mentor to a couple of startups from Egypt, and they are facing a lot of challenges, especially with the regulators, due to their the culture is still somehow not there. But thank you for your comments and enlightening us more about what's happening. I've shared a survey. I will stop the survey, and I will share the results. I just want to highlight to what extent do you use fintech products. I just want to highlight that the audience majority of it is familiar with it. But I want to mention that there is a 26% out of the audience which is not aware, never used it, or actually, and this is where the market, I think, today, and for us to grow and to tap into this market. Secondly, Namir, what do you think? What could the international affiliation of MENA fintech associations bring as an added value to the region, and where do you see the future of fintech heading?
See, practically a couple of things I would just list down. I mean, right away, instantly. One is that when you're having an international alliance, there are a couple of things you do with this. First thing is the regulatory best practices that you bring into the region. You try to basically learn from the implementations of other hubs and other regulators who may have implemented, let's say, a certain aspect of a certain vertical. So let's say if you're talking about regulations, and Singapore is certainly one jurisdiction you could look up to. Simultaneously, if you're looking for crypto asset framework as well, once again, you can basically do cross-border learnings with Singapore and other different jurisdictions too. Simultaneously, for open banking, you have you can certainly look into what South America has done, right? So one is the regulatory best practices, and just giving you an example. The second thing is that eventually you have trade wings. Trade wings are critical and important. So eventually you want to bring business into the region, correct? So when a fintech expands into the region, it brings with it capital, right? Or it raises capital for the region. At the same time, you're bringing in more business, not just to bring the platform into the country, or into the region, but you're giving access to an overall 22 country market that you have over here in the MENA region. Then at the same time, the other thing that you're also doing with those international alliances is also, when you're doing these trade wings, or when you're working on the trade side, it benefits the economy significantly, right? So you don't just have, like I said, a platform coming in, but when the platform comes in, it does employment. It brings in capital with it. And thirdly, and most importantly, the other thing that we're also doing with these international alliances typically, and why it's critical, is to bring in more quality fintechs coming into the region. Now, we do have realized, for example, now we have great fintechs coming in, homegrown fintechs coming in from the region itself. But typically, the initial stance was to bring in quality fintechs into the region. They expand into the region, and they get their roots in. So typically, this is how these international wings operate, and this is where the international alliances come in. I'll give you a small example. Lately, we had the session with the Lord Mayor of London, the Mayor of London, and the session was typically more around with 10 leading fintechs of UK, right? So we had the VCs plus we had the fintechs of UK, and the main agenda was how to enable them to expand into the region, right? So this is usually the efforts of any international alliance that not just us, but any other association that would be doing over here as well.
Yes, thank you, Namir. Muhammad, question about Startup Bootcamp. It's a global initiative in many countries. So how will this initiative, which is now in the Middle East, drive even more fintech initiatives, drive more funding, and help the international collaboration, and also help the region economy?
Sure. So it's a two-way street, basically. So one, by establishing ourselves here in Dubai as the fintech accelerator, with partnership with the regulator, with the corporates, with the banks, Visa, Mashreq, and the DFIC. One, we're attracting companies from around the world, from other startup bootcamp accelerators internationally. So we're technically present in most of the hubs, the fintech hubs in the world. So we're in London, we're in Singapore, we're I think in a couple of other places, and we share pipeline when we have any program running in any country. We share pipeline. So me as the accelerator in Dubai, have access to the fintech that are applying to other programs or that want to move from London to Dubai, let's say, or from Singapore to Dubai. So for example, now we have, for the upcoming cohort, we have one company coming from London, one come from Malaysia, one from Hong Kong, and one from Singapore, in addition to the companies that are already established here, and mostly are expats. So that's the first direction. Also, once for the companies here and that join the program also, we offer them the opposite direction. So a company based in Dubai who wants access to the French market or the English market, we facilitate these connections and help them connect with these offices in order to expand that market. So both ways. And in a lot of cases, some of the funded companies outside, they want to come into Dubai or they want to raise money from here. So in a way, we are supporting this highway, let's say, in both directions. I don't know if that answers your question. Or yeah.
Thank you. There's a question about the value that Fintech Hive is giving and the opportunities. How can people tap into these opportunities? How can they contact, who can they contact, website or whatever, to try to bring new startups in the market?
So the DIFC continues to focus on attracting the startups across all tech sectors, and in particular the fintech. Our website has a description of all the programs that we currently run, either individually or in partnership with other accelerators like Startup Bootcamp. And the opportunity is actually vast. You can look at the programs we offer. We offer a startup early stage accelerator program, a growth stage accelerator program, a scale-up program for companies that are interested only in raising capital and funding and expansion. In addition to the talent development programs that we offer, whether it's the female accelerator, the female talent development accelerator, or even the Aspire talent accelerator that we've just launched in partnership with Startup Bootcamp. The DIFC looks at the future of finance as a whole, and the fintech is one driver of that. So the whole team is aware and prioritizing all of these conversations. We look at talent from all over the region to come and leverage on the ecosystem that we have built in the UAE for these companies to grow. They can have access to regulation through the independent regulator of the DIFC, who are the DFSA. They have their own regulatory program, the innovation testing license, where they work with the startups closely to understand that technology and regulate it. They have access to business opportunities that are offered through our partners. They have access to the supporting VCs and funds from the DIFC, and also $100 million fund that is set up by the DIFC with a focus of investing in fintech specifically. And I believe there is amazing talent in the region, in the Middle East specifically, and these individuals will truly benefit from the ecosystem that we have in the UAE that will enable these ideas to come to life and go to market and create and nurture these companies here.
Thank you. And yes, if anybody of the startups, fintechs is looking for to launch this idea, I think this is the part of it where you can have the best value joining any of the fintech hubs. And the DFIC Fintech Hub is Fintech Hive is one of them. Mirna, what's the future roadmap of Finex 22, and how can, if you want to talk to or address to the regulators, what do you need from them?
Actually, let me talk to the talent with us here on the call. And I realized that 70% of the audience is Lebanese, and I'm Lebanese, and I really want to see entrepreneurs succeeding. Whenever we run a hackathon or a challenge, please take this seriously. لأنه this is a program run by a bank. يعني when a bank says, I'm looking for, مثلا هلا we have we have one by Bahrain Islamic Bank, and we have one by GIZ in collaboration with a few other players in the market. Whenever you apply to these, you know that half the job is done. So half your business development to enter into a bank, to partner with a bank is done. So please, we're doing this for you. We don't charge you anything. I mean, you come and join the platform, you use the sandbox for free, you apply for the hackathons and challenges for free, you get accelerated for free. Please take advantage of this and try to set up companies, try to turn your dream into a reality, because this is all for you. You are the future. So this is number one that I have to say to the fintechs. The second thing is we are launching in collaboration with the space in Saudi Arabia, the Munshaat NCB accelerator in Saudi on the 1st of November. That's the plan. And I would encourage everybody from the audience to really find a Saudi company, a Saudi partner, a Saudi startup to enter this accelerator, because this is these are the accelerators that actually take you into the market. You get the funding, you get to meet the banks, you get to work with the banks, you get closer to the regulators, just like what Raja is doing for the DIFC. These are all amazing efforts that are being put in place to support the fintechs. So don't wait for us to come and invite you to join. You should be waiting for these programs to start. And I know that Noha, we always have conversations and we talk about the amazing work that is being done in Egypt. And personally, I think Egypt is by far the market for fintech. I mean, if I get to move anywhere, I would go and sit in Egypt. Financial inclusion, the demand, huge population. I mean, anything you do, if you do anything in fintech, you will definitely succeed, because there is someone grabbing that opportunity. Banks are open. The central bank, I mean, when I was at Thomson Reuters in the old days, we used to wait years to get one thing changed in the regulations. Now we see regulations changed almost every month. And I know the team inside the central bank that is working on payments and data and eKYC and this and that. I mean, regulators are sometimes faster than the market. Trust me on that. They are becoming much faster than the market itself. And Egypt, I know that the banks are opening up. So don't wait for someone to come and tell you, why don't you do this and that? Just keep an eye on the market and grab the opportunity. When it comes to regulators, we as Fintech Galaxy, we do a lot of work. We should be paid by the MENA Fintech associations for the lobbying that we do. we do your job, Namir. We do a lot of lobbying, and it is probably the most difficult job to understand the regulators, try to explain to them what the market needs, and try to make a difference at that level. But alhamdulillah, I have to say that we have built relationships over the years. It just didn't start with Fintech Galaxy. We've been doing this for years and years, and now it's only culminating to actually move the needle. I think, as I mentioned, Saudi is an amazing opportunity. Egypt is doing fantastic in terms of regulations. Bahrain is the testing bed for the whole region. I mean, you test in Bahrain and then you go everywhere else. Use that as your testing bed. And of course, the UAE, once DIFC and ADGM and the central bank, they merge into one overarching fintech unit, which is maybe Raja can say a bit more about that, but I know that it's happening. They're creating this fintech unit. Then the UAE becomes a much easier environment to deal with. So far, it's leading the region, but other markets are catching up heavily on that.
True. I think today the UAE is the #1 region according to the report.
It is.
It's leading in the market. And this brings me a question to Noha about the unbanked people and banking the unbanked. What do you have as ideas, and how do you approach this?
Thank you very much for the question, Rudy. Well, it's a huge opportunity within the Egyptian market. The fact that you have 60% of the Egyptian population within the age range of between like 16 and 40, and the fact that the percentage of unbanked, whether on the side of micro and small businesses or the individuals, is one of the highest in the region, that represents a huge, huge opportunity for fintech startups. We are working on building that ecosystem eventually to improve the financial inclusion within the country. We want fintech startups to start working with incumbent banks to customize and custom-make products, financial services that suit the needs of the unbanked or the underbanked in Egypt. Something that banks and insurance companies haven't done since they started, not because that they are bad, but because they had a better business opportunity that costs less. Reaching and customizing solutions to a market segment that has such thin profit margins is not exactly the business case that you can run by boards and raise budgets to execute. So this is how it's always been. With the advancement of technology and the emerging tech startups who are currently mainly disintegrating the value chain of services offered by banks, insurance companies, and microfinance companies, focusing on one service, being agile on the ground, reaching unbanked and underbanked, scaling is what we are counting on, and that's our attempt to actually tackle financial inclusion issues, the financial inclusion issues that we have in the country. And you have all the government agencies, you have all academia, you have venture capital funds, you have telcos playing an important role as well, all supporting that idea of using fintechs as an enabler or as a vehicle, and emergent technologies as enablers to business models that are inclusive by nature. Thank you.
And this brings another question to Namir, to pick up on Mirna's comment. How can you help the fintechs the fintechs companies more? What do they need more? Are you tapping into this? I'm sure you are. You're going to share with us now how.
Yes, so typically when you're trying to tap onto an issue or a point, for example, if it's, let's say if we're speaking of, let's pick up something that's being discussed right now and that's happening, open banking, right? So open banking is once again something where the regulations are picking up. Open banking is a place where now the regulators are looking into it very carefully, and I mean, one of the recent surveys that we have conducted, almost 12 central banks are very, very extremely keen on implementing open banking solutions. But then how do you address the opportunity? Now, when you're addressing the opportunity, typically you need to understand how you tap onto it. You just can't jump onto an opportunity just like that and say that, I'm doing something into open banking. So after a recent work that we have done, we were able to identify different asset classes where the central banks are looking into. So, it's not just the payments angle we're looking into. We're looking into KYC, we're looking into loan settlements, we're looking into digital onboarding in multiple fronts. So when you are working on such bridging the gap sort of an angle, you need to be very specific in terms of what is the low-hanging fruit you need to focus on. Right? What is really imperative for the region? Simultaneously, the other thing is that when you're looking into the low-hanging fruits on what you need to focus on, what is more implementable as well. It's not just it's a low-hanging fruit and we just execute it. I mean, is it really executable, or is the infrastructure ready right now? So that's what you need to identify along with the regulators too. So for example, in some nations, I can't name the country, but typically the intentions are there to execute, but the technological framework is not yet ready to implement open banking. Just giving you a just giving you a real life example. So the central bank is working on its initial payment modernization framework for the next 6 months, and then after that the focus is going to be towards it. So these are those things that you're able to identify when you are able to sit with the regulators, sit with the central banks, and identify the key issues you need to focus on. When you identify the key issues, then the relevant players make the relevant tweaks. So if you're doing something in Bahrain, if you're doing something in Saudi, if you're doing something in UAE, the strategy may differ for all of these fintechs, typical to what it's going to be in just one jurisdiction. The other issue that then typically comes into play is when you're enabling them is standardization. There's no standardization in our region as of yet, right? So if there's no standardization, like I said, the strategy for each and every single country needs to be a lot more tweaked and a lot more personalized as per the region. So Rudy, I mean, in terms of what needs to be done and how you need to do it, yes, primarily you need to understand what vertical, and most importantly in that vertical, what is that specific pain point that you are trying to address, and is that pain point that you're trying to address relevant or a requirement of that specific country itself. Otherwise, it is a very difficult sell to just bring in an open banking solution or any other solution for any of the vertical and basically implement it. For example, when another example would be one of our key players is TransferWise, right? So we had an initial discussion, and I mean, the point is that typically am I there? Because I see myself. Okay, there's apologies for that. Yeah. So well, basically, it's all about understanding the specific issues for every single vertical and then being able to address it. Otherwise, you just can't go to the regulators and say that just please approve this. It just can't happen. So it needs a lot of effort, as Mirna mentioned. It needs constant hammering. It needs constant dialogue and discussions.
Thank you for that, Namir. And then I will go to Raja. And since you are operating under DFIC and DFIC is a regulator, how can this help or create a new, what do you want to call it? A new strive for new regulations, facilitate the regulations, maybe even make them faster in adoption or in, because the disruption happens much faster than the regulation or the regulator actually. So will this help the facilitation of regulation under the DFIC? Raza, are you here? Okay, we'll continue with Mirna. Sorry, with Muhammad. Muhammad, how many startups you have currently? You said I think you have a new session that is starting, and what's the majority of them they're trying to solve which problem?
So overall, in terms of fintechs in the region, I think we crossed the 40-45 startups now with the current cohort. So we just recruited the new 10 companies that will start the new cohort mid-November. And for this cohort, actually, we tried to shift the focus a bit. In the last cohort, I can tell you, the first cohort was about payments, was about peer-to-peer transfer, these kind of things. Second cohort was more B2C, different solutions, nothing specific in terms of focus. What we tried to do for this cohort is diversify a bit. So I can tell you we got we were interested in RegTech. A lot of the companies that are trying to decipher regulation for smaller companies and try to help them navigate these regulations and the regulation aspect of their operations. We focus a lot on InsurTech. We tried to bring in companies that are operating in the insurance vertical, and we successfully got 2 companies actually in this cohort that we will announce, I think, in a couple of weeks, in 2 weeks. We tried also to shy away a bit from B2C companies and move towards B2B. We see a lot of the solutions now focus on fintechs for consumers direct, but we sometimes tend to forget that there's a lot of other verticals that we're not serving well, properly at least. So we're doing corporate spend management, we're doing capital markets, all of these solutions that we haven't seen a lot of startups in the region tackling them. We try to bring them into the region or support startups that are coming up with their ideas in these different sectors. So in summary, we try to get InsurTech, RegTech, and then a bit of capital markets and B2B solutions for this cohort. And I think the market needs this kind of solution going forward.
Okay, thank you. Just want to see if Raja is back. Raja, are you with us? Okay, I'm just sharing now with everybody. We're launching a new channel of communication with DxTalks as this is the season 2. If you want to be with us for any news, any related digital transformation talks, fintechs, and so on, please do join this group. So we're going to start rounding up. Noha, what do you have as final thoughts about this panel and about fintech, so we can start concluding?
Well, thank you very much, Rudy, for the chance to be here. If we want to sum up everything that's been said in today, fintech is the new reality, the financial industry. Within the foreseeable future, the way banks, insurance companies, microfinance institutions, leasing companies, the way they do business is going to change significantly. And I'm not just talking about the business models they adopt or the delivery channels. I'm also talking about their operating models on the ground. So are going to change significantly. Thanks to Corona, of course, and many other factors that are related to the change in consumer behavior and preferences of the new generation Z, banks or financial institutions that are now going to start changing now and to do it quickly are going to cease to exist within 5 to 7 years from now, because the rate and the pace of the evolution is accelerating as we speak. Fintech startups have a huge opportunity to generate value. Of course, we're encouraging them to try to use all the resources that are availed around the Arab world. You have activities happening all over. You have wonderful ladies like Mirna, Raja, and other ladies around the region who are taking initiatives to make sure that the financial industry will become inclusive, and gentlemen, of course, but luckily women are inclusive by nature. We do not leave anybody out, and we do not leave any man behind. And that's who we are. So you see all those initiatives are mainly managed and driven by ladies. Of course, I'm a happy person that this is a fact. So I encourage startups to take all the opportunities, use all the resources there, and always remain focused on their customers. To provide value, you are going to grow and succeed. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Namir, can you please also share with us your thoughts?
So my point would be very simple and very basic. See, the thing is, the way where the fintech industry is heading towards, where we are going towards right now in the region. Let's also understand the fact that this region that we're operating in is, in terms of 5G deployment, it leads globally, right? So that's a major sign where the industry is heading towards, and how ready we are as consumers, how ready we are as consumers of financial services. Despite the fact we have the highest rate of 5G deployment, yet we face the issues of two major issues. Either we are underbanked or either we are overbanked, right? Yet at the same time, the financial services solutions may not be up to the mark. So therefore, if I look into the key angles of the opportunity, it has been there. I mean, we have been talking about it for numerous years, that the opportunity in MENA is way beyond any other region. That's there and that's evident. However, the underlying fruit that I would see over here, I mean, the main action points that I would see right now in the region is, number one, going to be remittances. And it's certainly going to pick up more and more. Let's also understand the fact that in the region we have so many cross-border remittances happening, yet the region is not, completely tapped onto this specific segment. Let's also understand the fact that after US, Saudi, and UAE are the countries that have been doing the major amount of remittances and the largest sending countries in the world. Yet the remittance business is still, led by the incumbent. So once again, it's a major market to tap onto. Payments remains a very extremely important place. Financial inclusion again is tapped onto by multiple segments, which includes remittances as well, which also includes payments too. Micro lending, Egypt is definitely a market for micro lending. And any market that has financial inclusion issues, micro lending is certainly a thing that's picking up. Now, when we talk about micro lending, it's not just focused on the emerging markets such as Egypt, where you have financial inclusion issues, but also for markets such as the UAE, where you have micro lending products such as buy now, pay later. BNPLs are there almost like in most of the markets, right? So BNPL is there in also in Egypt, just launched by Al Futtaim as well. You also have BNPL being launched over here in UAE, and simultaneously in Saudi as well. So you see, the space is specific to these angles. I think that there's humongous opportunity. Just make sure, as I mean, my point over here, if I'm rounding it up for the fintechs, would be that just make sure that you understand, or you have someone that you speak to when it comes to regulations. That is critical and that's key, right? No regulator in the market right now is going to permit anything that has been unexplored. They would always want to see that whether this regulation is going to be a hindrance in terms of in terms of the consumer rights. So for that, you need to be, I mean, you don't want to be shot down instantly by after launching the product because the regulations don't permit. So please make sure you do your homework up and down, where in every possible way. It is great to have a great product. It is great to have people backing you up. But if you do not comply, if the regulations are not something that is going to support you, if there is any gray area, there are high chances, and I'm being very blunt, high chances that you will be left nowhere. So before building up your tech, because the tech is a major investment, right? When you're building up your tech, just make sure that you also study the regulations very clearly. There's a lot of fine print in the regulations, and for that you need people who understand the regulations. So understand the regulations as you build your product. You don't want to be in a position where you put a lot of money in and then you're like, man, this was my market and now I can't do it. So these are some of the things that I would ideally would want to recommend. There's so much more, but I would leave the rest for my other participants and other colleagues to basically address. But I'm happy to help in terms of regulations. Happy to help in terms of any advice that is needed in terms of understanding the regulations specific to our countries. Happy to do that. Please feel free to reach out. And thank you, Rudy, for arranging the session. And look forward to participating more in terms of supporting whosoever we can.
Thank you, Namir. I just want to discuss the last poll, which if you are an entrepreneur, are you thinking of creating fintech startups? We have here 27% of our audience already, they have done them. So they are thinking about it, 14%. In ideation phase, 23% and 14% not interested, and the rest is not an entrepreneur. So we have around 40% of our audience who is thinking about, and this is where I think the panel can help a lot and advances your ideas. And then now we have a selection. Mirna, I wish Daraja is here. I don't know what happened. We'll try to get her back. Mirna, also, if you can start concluding and your final words. Also, sorry, before Mirna, you start, I just shared also the feedback for this session. Please, we would like to hear your feedback. The more feedback we have, the more we can enhance the format of this talk show. Thank you.
Basically, I mean, Noha and Namir said it all. What I want to add is one simple thing. People underestimate the power of networking. And this is one thing that I keep telling everybody, startups and entrepreneurs, that build your network, attend as many calls and events and webinars, go through training, because you never know when you will need certain people that you thought you never needed them. And it's very awkward and hard to build a relationship when you need something from someone. So build a relationship when you don't need it. Build it just for learning and for connecting and for understanding other markets or other players in the market. And when you need this relationship, you will find it ready for you. And this is something from firsthand experience. Technology itself, I mean, you can build any technology for $50,000. It doesn't take you more than that. But network and relationships and the trust in the market and the name in the market, it takes you millions and millions to even scratch the surface. So do that, invest a lot of time on relationships, never burn bridges, always look beyond, always look at what you can give before what you take. There's always something that you can add to the table that people might need. Join as mentors. If you are bankers and you want to go into startup scene, join as mentors, help the startups understand banking, and then they will help you build your startup. There's always something that you can give and take. And of course, I mean, with the work that Noha and Namir and Muhammad and Raja, everybody is playing an amazing role. And this is a region where opportunities are abundant. And the best startups ever were created during the times of crisis. The financial crisis in 2008 and 9 created all the startups that we see today. The Ubers and the BNP, what's the name of that thing?
Daddy. No, Afterpay.
No, not that.
Which one?
So basically all the major startups were created during that phase, and even the MasterCards of the world were created after major crisis that happened. Airbnb. So yeah. So Airbnb.
I thought you said BNPL.
For now, it's temporary on hold.
I think it's 8 p.m. I'm done for the day.
Yes.
Thanks for your time.
Muhammad, can you also round it up? Last final words. And Raja, are you back? I don't think so. Anyway, please, Muhammad.
I think everybody agrees on the common theme. The opportunities are huge. There's so many problems. There's so many challenges to be solved. And my recommendation is not to focus on a certain specific vertical. Just like keep an open mind for the startups. I mean, explore opportunities, explore challenges all over. Either could be B2C or B2B, or there's like 8 or 9 sub verticals in fintech, and then go after these. There's an opportunity in each one of these industries or verticals. So yeah, I mean, just keep it short. That's my advice.
Rudy, one thing I would like to add additional just is going to be that when you for everyone, when you're setting up your platforms, the critical thing to understand is one thing, that is, don't make early I've done this myself as well, and I've seen many fintechs and many startups suffer after that big time. That is, don't make emotional decisions when you're setting up your company, right? One, and make sure that, because, you know, I mean, you may be working with a technologist, you may be working with someone else, but you don't want to be a whole, you know, you don't want to be held as a hostage to them, because typically when you have built products, things change. So make sure, please do not think as if a company is going to scale for sure. And if a company is going to scale for sure, what equity, what percentage you would want to give to someone at what stage? Trust me, this is as basic as it sounds, but it is a major issue that comes up later. So when you're doing this, when you're building up a fintech, please remember, do not take any irrational or emotional decisions when you are distributing your company into other players as well. This is a major issue, and please sign documents, because that is, I've seen that not just for one fintech, but 3 to 4 fintechs very recently, because there has been a rise in many fintechs coming in. This problem has arisen in multiple forms. So make sure that you do your paperwork well. It's as basic as it sounds, but it's very critical.
And especially now with more investments that are available in our region, I think this is very sound and helpful.
As Mirna said, best time, but also best region. No other region is as untapped in this era as the MENA. This is a completely untapped market versus Singapore, Europe, South America, North America. These are all saturated markets. Right?
Unfortunately, I wanted to share a slide about this, but I have issue with technical issue. I'm not able to share anymore. I lost my laptop for some reason. So it is really in the emerging, the Middle East is in the emerging side of the startups and fintechs in specific. Yes, there's a lot of untapped potential here. With that, I really like to thank my speakers today for their awesome interventions. Mirna, thank you again. I hope you're well. And also, I would like to thank every participant and wish everybody to stay safe in this COVID time for you and your family, even though COVID is driving digital transformation forward. But in the same time, we have to stay safe. Be safe, and thank you.
Thank you, Rudy.
Thank you, Rudy. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye, Noha.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.